Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Again, my name's Paul. It's Paul Vett. I do have a last name. I'm a grad student. I just didn't give it to anybody at first. I'm a grad student in Toronto, and I'm looking at geotagging and social media. And in particular, I've been looking at Twitter, but I've been chatting with people about other services. And so I've been doing a project. It's a tool. It's a website that aggregates tweets. And I'm going to show you some examples of what I've been doing with it. I'm not going to demo it live because I don't trust the network with my laptop, but if you want to see it, feel free to come chat to me after and we'll go somewhere, grab a beer and play around with it. So the quick overview of what I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to give you a quick intro to social media. I'm sure everyone here knows what Twitter is, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. Then I'm going to scare you with what I've been doing and make you rethink using geotagging if you've been doing it, and I know some people here at the conference have been, so maybe you'll rethink it after you see this. And then once I've done that and scared you, I'm going to try to cheer you up a bit with some good aspects of geotag. So it's not all bad news, and there's a balance. And I think it's important that we take a bit of a look at that. And then after that, again, I'll be around. We can chat. We can go for beers. Here are some typical social media sites. Like I mentioned, I'm focusing primarily on Twitter for my project. But I've chatted with people about Foursquare and Yelp, which are sites that let you check into locations or give reviews of restaurants, things like that, which are basically social media, and you're tagging your location if you check in that you're at Hope. And I think I saw that somebody is the mayor of Hope. So that's one example. And then Flickr is another one that you might not think of as a geotagging social media site, but if you're taking lots of photos, you can embed your GPS coordinates in them if you're using an iPhone, for example, and then when you upload that to Flickr, it can expose that for you. And that's a good and a bad thing. And so there's one big social media site that's missing from this list, kind of conspicuous in its absence. And I'll talk about it a bit later. It doesn't really have geotagging right now, but it's going to be a problem in the future, I think. So for somebody that just got their first smartphone, right, and they got an iPhone, it comes with all these apps on it. There's now an official Twitter for iPhone app. And they fire up their first tweet just because they're playing around with their new phone. They're like, I wonder what's going to happen. And it pops up this prompt here. It says, geotagging disabled. What do you want to do? And so configure is the default option, and the other one is cancel. So clearly the typical person who just wants to get rid of dialog boxes as fast as possible is just going to click configure, and then it's going to say, do you want to do this? And they're going to be like, yes, go away, stop asking me, I want to tweet about my meal. And so that's going to be the typical case, right? But that's not the only case, right? I mean, other people, like, I'm sure there are a lot of gadget-aholics in this room right now, right? I mean, I think somebody asked for a show of smartphone hands earlier, and there were a lot of them, right? So even if you're aware that there are implications to these decisions you're making, or if you're consciously making them, it might not be for the right reasons. And I did a bunch of interviews as I was talking with people about geotagging, and this is kind of a typical example of why people start.
I started to get into it when I got the iPhone 3G. I heard about Twitter. I signed up when I got the phone itself, and I figured might as well try it out.
So there you go. Might as well try it out. That's the typical train of thought. That's as hard as people think about geotagging before they start using it, typically. And so does he understand the implications? He's a tech podcaster, so I'm sure he has some sense of what's going on. But does everybody who makes this ooh shiny decision? No. No, they don't. So a brief timeline of geotags on Twitter. Originally, Twitter just let you put in a location field, and you could set it to whatever you want. It was just text. So my location was Toronto. Other people put in a city or a country or a state. And eventually, clients started updating this with GPS coordinates. And so that's when I started getting the idea that this might be worth looking at. And I thought I was going to have to scrape Twitter and extract this field and figure out who was actually updating it and when it was getting updated. But luckily for me, later on in 2009, they added metadata to each tweet that you could embed a GPS coordinate in it. So that made it much easier for me for this project, because I could just get the tweets and then pull the metadata right out of them. And originally, there was no way to ask Twitter just for geotag tweets. You got all the tweets, no matter what, and you had to discard them and filter them on your own. And eventually, the APIs got richer, and I stopped having to get gigs of data for the occasional tweet, which was super. So this is on the BlackBerry. This is what happens when you enable, or when you try to set up Uber Twitter, which is the client I use for geotagging. And you'll see that it has a bunch of options. It gives you some choices as to how much you want to share and how accurate you want it to be. So for instance, I've picked the second one, not the cell tower, but the assisted GPS setting. And here's a geotag tweet I did at a concert. And so the push pin is where my phone reported me as being, and that red dot in the corner is where I actually was. So you can see that I'm about 3 streets off. So that's pretty inaccurate, right? And that may be reassuring to somebody, but as we're going to find out, it's not actually that reassuring because one tweet, sure, is inaccurate, but many tweets start to add up to a little more accuracy. And so this is what the tweet looks like from the API. You can see it's just got the GPS data right in there, and it's super easy to use. Twitter just gives you everything you need. So why is this a big deal, right? Like, who cares? I took a photo of myself eating ice cream, geotagged that, posted that. What does it matter? Who cares where I get my ice cream from, right? Like, nobody, right? But there are reasons to care. I don't know, can anyone speculate as to why this might be a big deal? And just shout it out because I can't see anything.
Stalking.
Right, stalking's a good one, yeah?
The man.
The man, all right. Robbery, yeah, so exactly. So there are all these good reasons. Exactly, that would be brutal. All right, so, this came up in my interviews again, and so the same podcaster I was talking to before has a little anecdote that he gave me that hit it right on the head and exactly what you guys have been saying, and exactly what worried me when I first heard about this.
One of the guys that I know, he's a friend of mine from Henry's. We do some of the work together for the video stuff. He tweeted me a few weeks ago saying, "Well, yeah, I'm looking at your tweets, and by the tweets, I think you live in this area of Mississauga." Right. Which, for me, it's not a problem. I'm pretty open with what I'm doing, but I can see that becoming an issue with some people that might not be aware that they're sharing that sort of data.
So what he's saying there is basically that one geotag is just an anecdote. It's one little tidbit. But many geotags put together become data. You can look at them and you can make inferences. And so this is what I basically wanted to find a way to illustrate this to people, right? This is a kind of a nebulous concept to grasp. It's kind of abstract. You're thinking, well, maybe people can do something with my tweets, but you're not really sure what. And I'm talking about Twitter specifically because that's what I looked at, but this is true of other geotagging services as well, right? So I tried to figure out how I could express this to people. And most people are visual, or a lot of people think visually, and it tends to make a big impact on people. So I decided to start collecting geotagged tweets and do some analysis on them, and then visualize that, put it on the screen so people can say, whoa, this is scary. And my goal ultimately is to creep people out and to make them think of what they're doing. So yeah, and on top of that, right, people are already doing this. It's the same reason like for full disclosure, right? People are doing this and they're not telling anybody, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. So my goal is to be the person who tells people that this is going on. I want to shine some light on it. And I want people to realize that they're making that choice with long-term consequences, confront it, and make it consciously, and maybe they'll choose to share. And if they do, that's up to them, but at least they'll be fully informed. So an early experiment, was an early prototype. I was just looking at grabbing tweets and plotting them just to get a sense for what was going on. And this person's asking if the feature is creepy, and I think the answer is yes. I absolutely think it's a creepy feature. So at this point, I was just grabbing from what Twitter calls the garden hose, which they have a streaming API, so you can just connect to it, and they'll just fire some percentage of the tweets your way. And I was finding about 1% of the tweets were geotagged at this point. This was 8 months ago or something, and it's gone way up since then. But like I said earlier, I was getting gigs of bandwidth just from megs of tweets, and it was unsustainable. So the first step was to build on that and use filtering. So they added an ability to filter based on locations. So that's what I did. I just asked for geotagged tweets in certain locations. I asked for 3 cities in particular, Toronto, which is where I am, New York, and San Francisco. So I've been collecting geotagged tweets from those locations for maybe 6 months now, and except when the process crashes and I'm not around to restart it. I have pretty much the entire sample for that period in these cities. And so that's about 1 tweet a second, which is what I'm getting, which doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of this has been running, that's about 3.5 gigs of tweets. So here's an example of just one user that I was getting tweets from that I'm going to keep coming back to a bit. This is an early demo, just grabbing the user, throwing their tweets on a map. And what I did was I asked the database, I was like, who's tweeting a lot in Toronto? What are the top 10 users? And then I went through them, and there were a couple bots, which was kind of interesting, like a fire service was telling you where the fires were, which was kind of neat, I thought. But then this guy came up, and he makes a perfect example. You can see right on the screen right now a couple of clusters just by looking at it, right? There's 3 clusters that are pretty obvious, and they all have different amounts of tweets, so you can judge how much time the person's spending at each of these locations. And then if you look at the text of what they're saying, so the text that I've highlighted here, this guy's just finished work, so you have a sense that this tweet was probably at work in the parking lot, and there's some other tweets that corroborate that story. So this is kind of scary to look at. If somebody was just like, here's a map of where you live, right? You'd be like, well, that's weird. But I think we can do a little better with technology. So I thought I would teach the computer to do this analysis on its own. So I spent a while trying to learn about clustering algorithms, and it turns out it's a complicated field, and it's an NP-hard problem, and there are various heuristics, and I spent days reading Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is just not coding. It's just not. So one night I was talking to my friend, and I was like, oh, I have this demo tomorrow, and I'm not done clustering, and it's NP-hard, and I don't know which algorithm to use, and he was like, just come over, and we'll get this done. So I went to his place, and we just hacked away that night, and my buddy Riz came up with this solution right here, which is, again, I said this is an NP-hard problem. This is the brute force solution. But it works, which is all that matters. So again, it's not efficient, but it gets the job done. And there'll be a lot of clusters with just one tweet, according to this algorithm, but I just ignore them because they're uninteresting. So you can see the results here on the map. So it's pretty successful. A bunch of clusters have been highlighted, the big one in the middle there. And it's not perfect. You can see there's some overlap and some bugs to sort out. But for the most part, it works. And it works well enough. So the next step, I thought, is, so we have these clusters, and that's scary. It can be like, here's where you spend the most of your time automatically. But how can we make this even creepier for people, even more visceral? So they're like, wow, I really need to think about what I'm doing. And the next step then is to automatically classify the locations. So again, I pulled up Wikipedia's documents on document classification and read about filtering and probable models and AIs. And I was like, you know what, forget this. I just pulled up some of the big clusters that I knew, that I could tell by inspection where somebody was at home, and I just looked for keywords. So you can see these are some examples. Somebody was at home with their dog a lot, so I thought maybe people only tweet about their dog when they're home. People tweeting about sleep in bed. That's the sort of thing that people do when they're at home, or about being awake at night. And there are other types of locations that you can identify by keyword too, right? So at so-and-so's house, I mean, it doesn't get easier than that, right? And watching TV, right? Nobody watches TV at work. You watch TV at home, unless it's the World Cup, I guess. But, so what I'm doing now is, again, when I try to get a user's report, I have all their cluster data available. I scan through each cluster, look for these keywords that I've manually identified, and then I just assign a score to each cluster. And one cluster tends to win. So if you look at the tweets in this cluster where there are hundreds of tweets, it's quite clearly where this person lives. And if you zoom in, you can pinpoint it pretty accurately. And you could reverse geocode that if you wanted. I'm not at this point, because that's not really my goal. But it's pretty scary, right? And so this person isn't consciously, he's not like, hey, come to my, I'm at home, it's great, and taking pictures of their house or something. They're just tweeting about casual, mundane things that are going on in their life. And based on that, it's enough to extrapolate the type of location. And I haven't done it, but this could be easily extended, as I showed you, to workplaces and to friends' houses and to, I don't know, where else do people go, anything. But I thought this is an example from Toronto, and most people here aren't going to be from Toronto, so that's maybe kind of boring for you. So I thought we were in New York. Let's look at New York. So I got here Thursday night, set up in a coffee shop, and just let it map. And I have it mapping in real time, so I just let it collect tweets for a while. And this is about an hour's worth of tweets. And you can see that it's pretty busy here in New York. Lots of people are tweeting, lots going on. And so what I did is I just kind of clicked at them, and I was like, I'd get a username, and I'd be like, oh, this person looks like they might tweet a lot, and I'd check out their Twitter page. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. And then I just did a database query again, aggregated everybody's tweets, and I was like, who are the most prolific New York tweeters that are geotagging? And so one example came up, and I thought I'd just run with it. So I put together this example on Thursday in just a little bit of time. So this is this person's Twitter tag, or Twitter page, and you can see a bunch of tweets there. And what's interesting, I find, about this example is that on this Twitter page, this person has thousands of tweets. None of these tweets here are geotagged. So only a small fraction of this person's tweets are geotagged, not a significant number at all. And that's still enough that we can extrapolate lots of details about them. So I ran it through the system, just plotted it, and you can kind of visually see, if you zoomed out, you'd see that this is a particularly popular cluster.